Yes, if I have a class, okay. We will continue with this object creation. Okay, we will continue with this object creation, and for time being, I would like to explain this concept in a simple manner, like a string. Okay, so till now we saw some primitive data types in Java. Primitive means they are the basic building blocks in Java, where one of the primitive data type is char, char, which stores one letter at a time, right? So if in Java, if you want to store multiple characters, then you need or we use string. Okay, string is a simple example that I can show here is like string s equal to Raghu. Like this, I can write something like multiple characters or a statement. Raghu is a student in the class or something like that. Okay, so I can write a statement or I can write a series of characters like that. I can write multiple things in one shot using this string. Okay, so before we understand, means we will see most of the concepts related to string in the next class. But for time being, just understand that string is used to store a sequence of characters. Okay, and the most important thing is string is not a data type in Java. Why? Because most of them think that a character can store one single char can store one single character at a time, and since string can store multiple characters in one shot, string is also a data type. That's what many people think, but it's a wrong assumption. String is never considered as a data type. So what exactly is a string? We will see in the next session. Okay. So now for a specific class called student, I'm creating three properties: int id, string s, or I say string name, and int age. Okay, three parameters, three features, or three properties, or three attributes that I have declared in a class. Now, the next thing that I will do here is try to create an object for this student class. Okay, so I write a main method. Okay, I write a main method. In this main method, I will try to create an object for the student class. Understand the scenario here. For creating an object for a class, the standard syntax is the class name student std some reference variable equal to new student. We'll explain each and everything in detail. Okay, but the first one is class name, then reference variable name, then equal to new keyword, then uh, the next part is ideally considered as a constructor. Okay, so whatever I see here, whatever I write here is considered as a constructor, but since we are not aware of this concept of constructor right away, let me say the type or the class name. Okay, just let me, for time being, just let me say this is the class name again. Okay, now at any point of time, if you want to create an object for either a student class or in future, if you create a class called machine, if you want to create an object for machine class, then all you do is machine m equal to new machine. That is what you do. Okay, so the next thing that you do here is when I say a student std equal to new student, what exactly happens? If you understand this concept, the rest would be very easy. Okay, so I say in this memory, okay, there will be an object which is created whenever you say new keyword. Okay, whenever you say keyword as new, it means give me some memory. Okay, give me some memory. So who will give the memory, or when will that memory be allocated? Whenever the line number 13 is executed at runtime by the JVM, that is when a new, or that is when a space will be allocated for you on your heap. Okay, let us assume that this is your heap, or let us assume that this is the memory which is allocated for Java. Out of that, let us assume that this is the heap. Okay, so in that heap, again an object will be created for you. So now if an object is created, how can you reach that object? A simple example, like you understood, in a regular scenario, if you build a house, if you want to go to your house, or if you want your friend to come to your house, what will you do? You give your address so that your friend can take the reference of that address and can come to your house, right? Now the same way in Java, if someone wants to access this object, why? Because in Java ideally there can be many multiple objects in the memory, right? There can be multiple objects which might be present in the memory. If I want to go to this specific student object, how can I go? I can go using the reference variable. So what will the reference variable contain? The reference variable std contains, std points to the student object in the memory. Okay, which means it contains the address of the object created. See, simple concept to understand here. std, when I say, is nothing but a reference variable. Don't consider the case, maybe it's a little bit wrong that I wrote here all caps error. This is all small error, so it's a small std I'm talking about. Okay, so std is a reference variable which is pointing to this object in the memory. So whenever you want to reach this object, you call std will take you. A simple example, you give your address to your friend will feed that address into a GPS, and the GPS will guide you how to reach your house. The same way, to this std, it is like a GPS. To this std, you give the address, and every time use this std to reach that object in the memory. Okay, now the next thing, std is pointing to a student object in the memory. Now the most important statement is std, if you go back to conversions, not conversions, data types and variables. Yeah, in test.java, if you go back to test.java, I told int x equal to 5, the first statement. In that, x is a variable of type int which can store a value 5 into it, right? The same sentence I'm going to write here. std is a reference variable of type. What is the type? See here, in the previous example, x is of type int. So now what is std of type? Is a reference variable of type? Anyone? Any guess? Very good. Student. Okay. So always make sure that case sensitive student class name starts with S. Okay. One second, team. One second. Student std equal to new student. So std is a reference variable of type student, and the next important thing is, and it is pointing to a student object in the memory. Okay, see, whatever statement that I told right now, or all I reiterated the statement many times, it might look very simple to you, but understanding this concept is the most important thing. Why? Because when you go to the concept of polymorphism, the statement 13 and 14 is the one which will help you a lot in understanding the entire concept of polymorphism. If you understand those two statements, understanding polymorphism in Java is dead easy. Okay, so any doubts till this point? Okay, very good. So now student std equal to new student, we got a reference variable. Now a quick question to everyone, maybe everyone knows the answer. From now onwards, how can I reach the object student in memory? Excellent. By using the reference variable std. Always remember that. Okay, dot is not, it's the wrong answer. It's not dot. If you want to reach the object, use the reference variable. Okay. Now, so you have created an object in the memory and pointed it to std. Now, the next thing, whenever you create an object, okay, and in that object, what are the features? Say, let us assume that student and id, name and age are nothing but they are the design. So it says that, let us assume that this shows this is a hall, this is like a kitchen, this is like master bedroom or something like that. So each one has their own values. Like if I say my lot is 10,000 square feet, the dimension, these values will be different. And if the lot is of size 5,000 square foot, the three values will be different. If the lot is of size 1,000 square feet, these values will be different, right? Which means all these properties differ at different instances, or it differ for different houses. The same way, for different objects, the three highlighted values can be same or can be different. Understand here, it's not that it must be same or different every time. It can be same or it can be different. Okay, but in general we will make it as different. Why? Because each student has a unique id in the school, so I will say id as different. So now, once I have created an object, I want to assign the values to that object. Now, how can I assign a value to that object? So the first thing is, okay, first let me go to, let me go till that object in the memory. How can I go? Using std. Okay, now I went till that object in the memory. Then in that object I have three parameters that I can set some values to. So let me set the first parameter value. So for that you need to use a dot operator. So you say std dot, and when you do the dot, the Eclipse has a content manager which will help you in giving some options. Okay, so for time being, all I want you to do is like id. The first value that I want to set is id, std dot id. So what is this id? This id is of type int. That is what it says. Okay, std dot id equal to number one, and std dot name, the second parameter, equal to, since this is a string, I write in double quotes Babu, and std dot age equal to 10. Okay, now I've created a student object and I have associated some values into the student object. Okay, now the next thing, if I say that this student has certain set of values, can I create one more object with a different set of values or not? Yes, very good. I can create n number of student objects always. Okay. So the next object that I say is student stud, any some random name you can give. Let's make it as more meaningful sometimes. Okay, new student, and even for this student I say stud dot id. I will explain this. Okay, let me complete this. I will explain. id equal to 2, stud dot name equal to Naveen, then stud dot age equal to 11. Okay, now in this scenario I've created two student objects and I've associated two values. Okay, let us just see with an example. So what I do here is, okay, sorry, I'm just giving a big picture here. So in the heap you've created two objects, object 1 and object 2. How can you reach object 1, team? STD. How can you reach object 2? Very good. So if at any point of time, if anyone wants to reach first object, I use std. If anyone wants to use the second object, I use stud. Okay, this is for first object and this is for second object. Okay, so like this, if you want, you can create n number of objects in the memory. When I say n number of objects, like if you, yeah, we'll see all this garbage collection later, but just remember that you can create n number of objects as long as the memory is available for you. Okay, so any doubts in object creation and assigning some values to it? Okay, that's good. So the next thing that I do here is create one more class, some dummy class. Okay, so now from this dummy, in this dummy class I will write a main method. Okay, I'll write a main method. In this dummy class I want to create an object for this student again. Observe very carefully. For this class student, I want to create an object in the dummy.java. So again, the statement always remains the same. I say student s equal to new student. Okay, student s1 equal to new student. Student ss equal to new student. Again, the concept remains the same. S dot id equal to 1 here. S dot name equal to Ram and s dot age equal to 10. Okay, so these three parameters, which are three reference variables which are created here, s1 and s2, or s1 and ss, are three reference variables which are pointing to three student objects in the memory. Clear to everyone?
Yes.
Okay, very good. So two things we saw. The first one is created a class, and in the same class created a main method and created an object for the same class here. Now we have one more class like dummy or test or whatever. If there are 10 students, okay, what's the question? So there's a question from Sai, like if there are 10 students, should we create 10 objects? Okay, so Sai, is your question like, if you say new student 10 times, should it have 10 reference variables, or can you reiterate your question? I'm just unmuting you.
So if there are 10 students in a class and if I want to enter the 10 students details, should I create 10 objects like S1, S2, like that?
Yeah. So there are two answers that I would like to say here, yes and no. The S is, why I told S is like, yes, you can create 10 reference variables like student S1, S2, S3, S4, S5, like that, S10, like that 10 reference variables you can create. If not, what we can do is, do you remember yesterday we understood that there might be a problem like this creating huge number of variables. So
Yes.
instead of doing that,
Yeah,
I
we
can
can
create an
create many
array, right?
variables. Yeah.
So I can create a student type array. I will show that example. But in the meantime, so
Okay.
the answer why no is like, since you can create an array of type student, the answer is no. That's why I told. But is it clear for you now?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. You please be on mute. Okay. The next thing. So I've created objects here and assigned some values. Now, whatever I did here is, I don't say it's wrong, but Java says that never ever do this. So what exactly Java says not to do? Java says that, hey, whenever you create some properties in a class, make sure that all the properties in the class are private, or the basic scenario it tells is, never give a direct access to the variables outside the current class. So what happens is, let us take an example of a simple bank example where I create a class called account class. In the account class, I say initial balance and percentage or interest rate. Two parameters I create. So every time when a new customer is created in the bank, or when a new customer takes an account, so I want to say that the customer initial amount is $0 is what I want to say. So, so I say here an account class. So in that account class, I say double initial balance and double interest rate. So this is what I have created. Now let us assume that there is someone like outside from dummy who has access to my parameters and my class. Then what they can do is, they can say account ACC equal to new account, and they can assign for a specific user the ACC dot initial balance is equal to $500, which means what is happening, all the properties of your class are being exposed to the outside world, so you will never have a control on the properties that you're going to create in your class. So what is that happening, the initial balance is being set to 500 by someone else who has access to these parameters. So Java says that giving a direct access to your variables to the outside world is not a good coding standard. Why? Because they can misuse this scenario. So restrict the access. That is what Java says. Okay. So when Java says that restrict the access, how can I restrict the access? The first thing Java says is, so whatever I am trying to explain here is one of the object-oriented programming principles that is called as encapsulation. Okay, encapsulation. So, okay, but before that, maybe there is one thing which I just forgot to tell you. So what did I do at line number 16 to 18? I am trying to assign some values. Okay, I'm just trying to assign some values to the object. If I want to print the values or retrieve the values, I can say like just student one ID is, or student one name is plus symbol, and I say std dot name. As simple as that. If I print it, it prints Raghu for me. Okay, it prints Raghu for me. Now in this scenario, when I say Raghu, it is nothing but the value that I am trying to retrieve from this object. So either if you want to set or if you want to retrieve, all you need to do is ask that reference variable, say that okay, reference variable dot that property, so that it can give you the value. Now from now onwards, what I do is I try to make these things as private. So when I make them as private, both the variables as private, okay, see, private means private is one of the keywords which is used for access modifiers. It is considered as an access modifier. So now the access for this initial balance is being modified, and it is said that the private is nothing but, it means it is inside the current class. So when I say inside the current class, it means this variable can be accessed only within the current class because of this access modifier. So anyone who is trying to access from outside the current class, it is throwing an error saying that, hey, the field account dot initial balance is not visible. Why is it not visible? Why? Because that property is now a private property. So this is not visible. So writing line number 8, which means like, which means accessing a private property from outside the outside that account class is not a valid scenario. Now the next question, if I cannot access the properties of an account class, then what is the use of creating properties in that class, in that account class, might be the next question. So Java says that, hey, hold on, I say like the properties can be private, but there is one more way where I can give access to these properties. That is nothing but using getters and setters. So for that I do right click, source, generate getters and setters, and so maybe let me just reiterate that one. I can write getters and setters. They are nothing but certain methods in Java. So either we can hard code them, like we can type them, or we can use Eclipse to generate them for us. So for that, inside this class, right click, go to source. Under source, you can go to generate getters and setters. Okay, you go here and say select all, or you can manually check these things. Okay, if you select two checkboxes, here it shows 4 of 4 is selected. 4 of 4 means if you expand this, there are two methods, get and set. We will see later slowly. Here again, get and set. Okay, so if I say OK, Control Shift F will format the code. Control Shift F, see, it has formatted the code. Now the next thing is, whatever parameter that I have created, for that parameter like initial balance, there are two equivalent methods which are created, like get initial balance and set initial balance. And for interest rate, two equivalent methods are created, like get interest rate and set interest rate. Now this means that these four things are nothing but a public methods which are equivalent to these properties. So now Java says that, or the concept of encapsulation or the concept of object oriented principles, one of the features, it says that, hey, don't give direct access to your to the outside world for your properties, rather give the access using the getter and setter methods. Okay, so the first thing, if I want to initialize or if I want to assign a value to the initial balance, what I do is I say, instead of directly accessing initial balance, I say acc dot set. Okay, set initial balance. I will call this method set initial balance, which is expecting some value as input. Okay, so I give 0 or whatever value I want to give. If I want to give 100, I will give 100 here. Now this is nothing but assigning the value. The next thing is printing the value. Acc dot get initial balance. Okay, let me just re-explain that these things. What is that I am trying to do at line number 9? I am setting a value. What is that I am trying to do at line number 11? I am retrieving or I am getting a value. So Java has created more meaningful methods for us. For setting a value, it says set initial balance, which means set followed by the property name, and if I want to retrieve the value, get followed by the property name initial balance. So set initial balance is used for setting a value, get initial balance is used for getting a value. Okay, so in this context, setter method and getter method are used for assigning and getting values. So most of you might ask a question like, hey, at line number 9, even at this point also I can write something called as 500. Okay, even at this point also I can write 500. What is the use of a setter method? But let us assume that, okay, let us assume that there is a scenario where you don't want anyone else to create uh, or assign a value to initial balance. Okay, so what you can do is you can say public double initial balance equal to 0. Okay, or let us assume that the bank gives $10 to everyone who creates an account. Okay, so it can say initial balance is 10 and no one else can modify it. So I remove that setter method, which means I will not give anyone in the outside world to change this initial balance. So there will never be a scenario of setter method, which means line number 9 is again invalid. So if I execute line number 11, it is nothing but it is calling the get initial balance, and the get initial balance is being shown as $10, which is nothing but the default value which is being given by the bank. So did you notice here team, I am trying to give an access to the outside world. If I want anyone else to change the initial balance, I can use this setter method. Okay, use the setter method to change the value. Now I can use line number 9 and I can set the initial balance to 500, and if I execute this, I can say that the initial balance is 500. Okay, but if I say that, hey, I don't want anyone else to change the initial balance, which means I am commenting out my setter method so that no one else can set the value or no one else can change the initial balance value. So every time it uses the default value given in the account class. So by using a setter and getter, I am trying to control the access that I am trying to give for that property, which the outside world can give, which the outside world can act upon. Is it clear? Is the concept of getter and setter clear to everyone? Everyone? Okay. So let me show a simple example here. So what I do is, not a package, I'll create something called as a machine. So in this machine, let me create couple of properties, like every property must be private. Okay, the concept of encapsulation is making, I make only initial balance public. Okay, that's what is the question. That's what is the things I see here. The concept of encapsulation is making the variables private. Okay, and whenever from now onwards, whenever you try to create an variable in Java, like a property in Java, never ever think of creating it as a public variable. If you create it as a public variable, I hope you might have understood, like, see, let us assume that I made this as a public variable. Okay, as someone has asked the question, let us assume I have made this as public. Now I told that I am not giving a setter method, which means no one else from the outside world must change this. That is what my intention is. But since I made this as public, the dummy can directly access my variable directly. See, it can directly access that initial balance and it can set it. So now what is happening? The concept of getter and setter, the value that it is giving, you are losing that value, right? So 99% of the time you should never, unless it is very required or anything, we should never ever create a property as a public property in Java. So always assume that the properties must be declared as private. The concept of encapsulation is making the variables private and giving the access for those variables using the public getters and setters to the outside world, so that the outside world can still use these private properties with these getters and setters. That is the concept of encapsulation, encapsulating everything in the form in a class. Okay, clear? So next example, a simple example, private int id, private string name, as the value of 10 is already assigned, how 500. Okay, are you talking about line number 8? In this current context, when I make this as public, is that the question, Padma? Okay, so uh, so, so I understand this one. See, the problem is initial balance, okay, must never be declared as private, public, sorry, must never be declared as public. That is the first thing. If you declare that one as public, the problem is you cannot control the access. See, in the current scenario, since initial balance is public, you don't have control over that. So whoever wants to create an object, they can say it has 500 or 5000 or 10,000 or whatever, they can do this. Okay, but Java says that make it as private. To solve that problem, make it as private so that they can never do this. Okay, so that is not allowed. But maybe someone else might ask a question. Let us assume that the setter method is available, and what if a user tries to set a value like this? What I can do? So what you can do is, if a user is setting a value like this, again you can go back to your account class, and setter method means this method will be called. In that you can check if initial balance means, we will see this in exception handling, if the initial balance is greater than 500, if anyone is setting, then you can throw some exception. That is what you can write. You can control the program, you can control the values in the setter method in this manner. Is that clear for you, Padma? Okay, yeah. So I do have two things, ID and name. So here I say source generate getters and setters, Control Shift F. So from now onwards, I say like I have a class called test, main method. So now in the main method, if I say like if I want to create an object for machine, I say machine equal to new machine. Okay, I've created two objects, MAC and MACH, like two machine objects. So now for this one, the values are being set using the setter method, and for this one also the values are being set using the setter method. Now, can someone tell me how can I print the value dodge? Anyone? What is the syntax? Any guess? What is the syntax? Machine dot get name, as simple as that. No, it's not set name, Irshad. Set, see, for everyone, just understand the syntax. What is that? We have two types of methods. One starts with set, set. The other one starts with get, get. Okay, so what is meant by set? Set means setting, get means getting or retrieving. Okay, so you need to use get method for retrieving the values. You need to use a set method for setting the values. If I run this, it shows dodge for me. Okay, clear with this how to use getters and setters in Java? Okay, any doubts, any questions on these getter setters? Anyone? Okay, okay, that's good. So if there are no questions, then what I would like to do is, like, I would like to just stop the session here for today, and I want everyone to practice this getters and setters more. Why? Because like this is how we do in a regular world, like creating properties and trying to set some values and get some values. This is how we do using getters and setters. Okay, so please make sure that everyone try to do the same scenario, like getting and setting using these getters and setters. Okay, so try to create multiple classes like a student class, machine class, account class, and animal class. Like that, you can create a shape class, multiple classes, create some properties in them, try to set the properties and get the properties. Okay, clear? Yeah, I'm stopping the recording here.